Good evening. There have been two things in my life that I have never chosen. One was poetry, and it was through poetry that I found fulfillment. The second thing is this. I never expected it. That was the last thing in my life that I would have done. But when it was announced to me last December, I felt very much like Mary at the Annunciation. And the only thing I could say is, be it done in me according to thy word. And then very much like Jesus, not my will, Father, but thine. Several years ago, when I began not to work with Infinite Way, I had been working with Infinite Way for a few years already. I had an experience, what I would call a dawning within. And I'm not saying a dawning within me. It's dawning within consciousness. The consciousness that we are. And it was an exercise in right identification. Whenever we look at the trees and the birds, we look at them and say nature. If we begin to reflect about it, we begin to realize that we are nature, that the trees and the birds and us are one. As a matter of fact, we can say and affirm that nature and I are one. Then I went outside and looked at the night sky. And again I realized the universe. When you reflect upon it, you realize that you are in the universe. The earth is in the universe. Therefore, you and the universe are one. And it was a very beautiful experience when the voice within said, and that is your consciousness. The same thing happens when we think of God. Once we've gone through this exercise in right identification, that we and nature are one, and then we go outside and see the night sky and realize that we and the universe are one. And as a matter of fact, that universe is our very consciousness. It's the only consciousness we are. That's all we are. Or as the biologist says, your body's made of stardust, physically and materially. Then we can become aware that I and the Father are one. In that very conscious realization of our true identity, we must walk always. And the time has already come where we can no longer deny our right identification. We should never voice it, but we should always walk in the awareness of what we are, because this is our very life. This afternoon, I was watching the landscape, and I opened the scriptural passages, something that Ralph has done so beautifully. And I fully became aware of this passage. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord. This is the day which the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. We can look at a wall like this, and let's think that this wall is the field of healing. This whole white wall is the field of healing. And if we take a pen and just put a dot in it, that would be physical healing, and the rest of it is healing. Most of us usually concentrate on that dot and forget about the rest. What healing is all about. Last week, I came up with a cold. And I went within, and I said, Father, if you don't want me to go to the class, I'll cancel it. But the voice within was very firm. And I said, no, I have decreed that. I want you to go. And I said, well, what is the meaning of this cold? Can I learn what is this sickness that I'm entertaining at this point? What is the meaning of it? Is there anything for me to learn? And the voice says, yes, healing. Usually, whenever we get sick, rather than getting rid of it, if we would just see and think, what is the meaning of it? What is there for me to learn from this experience? We then become aware of the whole process of creativity within us, which is the very process of healing. Let's think for a minute. If whatever we do, whether it is cooking or being a psychotherapist or being a construction worker or being a housewife or whatever, if we do this in the fullness of the creative process within us, whatever is to be healed, if there is anything to be healed, which I doubt, takes place on its own accord without our thinking about it. Or sometimes the process lasts for several months or several years or whatever. But what is the lesson for us to learn out of that experience? It comes to mind Paul when he was in the island, I think it was Sicily, that the viper bit his hand. And what did he do? He just went on working, shook it off, and kept on going. If we think of this as the creative process within us, whatever we do, rather than concentrating on the problem, or as Joel says, never meet the problem at the level of the problem, but looking at the very creative process within us, our very lives, whether we are cooking, just let your creative process cook. Whether you're working with people, let the creative process happen. Become a co-creator. And let whatever condition you're going through be. Many times we try to meditate, we can't meditate when we are sick. It's one of the most difficult things. Or when we are angry, try to meditate when you're angry. Then rather than concentrating on the problem, rather than trying to meditate the problem through, let's use the creative process. And we begin to become aware of another dimension within us. Another dimension that eventually grows and blossoms like these flowers. And keep on blossoming in different areas which we never thought existed in our own consciousness. And we begin to move from one position of anger or sickness or whatever to another position of fulfillment. And that moment of illness is either left behind or becomes less important in our lives. So sometimes it's very important not to try to get rid of things, because they are our very lessons. Our very lessons are right within it. It's like a seed for us to open, like an almond. You see, you crack it up and you eat it, and it nourishes you. Our stumbling blocks becomes our stepping stones. Many years ago, when I was a child, when I first began to read the Bible, I remember that I decided that I would interpret this Bible the way I understood it, no matter what. And I would not allow anybody to tell me what it meant. So I remember I used to get under my blanket with a flashlight and read the Bible every night. And no one knew I did it. It was my very private thing for many years. And it was through that experience that I began to discover another dimension which I was not fully aware of. But I knew I could sense it. It was something very distinct. Then years later, I ended up in the United States. And I had a very tremendous crisis. I had by then forgotten all about the Bible and all about religion the way I understood it then. And through this crisis, a very good friend of mine, who is the last or the least religious person I've ever known, One day she looked at me and she says, Rafael, you're the most religious person I've ever known. And I was shocked. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, no, I don't know. I just feel this coming from you. And I'm not religious. And up to this day, we're very good friends. She's not. I can attest to that fact. I began, through that process, to rediscover my religious self. And from there on, up to this day, I did not stop. It has been non-stop, almost 20 years. The part of the Bible that shook me most, and as a matter of fact, it's my beacon of light. I think it's John chapter 14, when he talks about that Jesus says, the things I do and greater things than this will you do. I recalled reading that part and be totally shocked. I was not aware that there was such a promise in the Bible. A promise which Joel has fulfilled for us, and a promise that is being fulfilled through every one of us. Every single day of our lives. Because the work we are doing, silent and secret, is slowly changing the world to the point that by the end of this century, we probably won't recognize it. It is exploding everywhere, in every nation. Go to the third world and you'll see liberation theology breaking through and changing the whole face of the earth. Stay here in the United States and you'll see people changing in every way. Through Christianity, through Buddhism, and through many other religions that are being born, and groups. It is this very transformation of our consciousness that people like Mary Baker Eddy, Joel, and every one of us is making possible. Every time we meditate, it changes. Every time we meditate, there is a new blossom. Or as my first teacher used to say, anytime you meditate, you draw 10,000 people to your state of consciousness. Right identification is our most important element in meditation. And the fact that sometimes we do not have the courage to accept the fact that I and the Father are one. The more we work through those 6 days of labor, which we all have to go through. I mean, we can never bypass those 6 days. We will be laboring and laboring and laboring until it fulfills itself as I. Until you hear it in your very within. And then you have to keep on working. The kingdom of God, like a mustard seed, blossoms in every one of us when we let it happen. And you must go through those 6 days of labor, which on the long run, when you look back, it was not labor at all. It seems so when you're doing it. It seems so when you're sick. It seems so when you're in pain. But whenever you look back, the pains are nothing. The pains are nothing. 20 years ago, when I went through a very powerful crisis, extremely painful, if you'd asked me, did you regret it? I can say, if I had not gone through those very painful days, I would not be here today. I have not a second of regret. And it was a pain, how can I put it? What I call psychological pain, which I think is worse than physical pain. Those very moments were the ones that brought me to the realization of the I am. And the first time I ever thought of that I am myself, I did not know, I was not aware of the full meaning of it. And it took me at least 7 or 8 years before I remember that moment. And then I realized, oh, this is what it really means. I was not aware of it. I was in so much pain that I am myself, it's just I am myself. But I never forgot that moment. It was like a beacon of light that I had just seen for 1 second. And it didn't mean much to me then. And it's when you begin to become aware of it on this light of the Spirit that you have the full content of what it means. And then it carries you on. It carries you on wherever you have to go. And it carried me from going to school to become a psychologist, into poetry, which I hated. And there I found my fulfillment. Something which I had always sought, and I thought it was a very elusive thing to be fulfilled. And from that moment of fulfillment to the fulfillment of you as I. And it's in that fulfillment when you become aware that, yes, I am. But not I am. you and I together. I am that I am, and that's what you are. In the awareness of it, in the fullness of this very fulfillment, like these flowers, totally fulfilled in the awareness of I am. And this is the very healing process. On this awareness, we are healed. Healed of what? Healed of delusion of separation. There is no such a thing as separation, and there never was, and there never will be. And yet, we have that very thin veil that haunts us for years and years and years, that we forget who we are, and even if we know it intellectually, we don't have the full thrust of the realization of I. And it was through that exercise in right identification, when you become aware of it, that nature and you are one, that the universe and you are one, and dare to look at the night sky and realize that is my consciousness. And see how infinite it is. How infinite. And that is what we are and what you are. There is no separation. We have never been separate from the universe, even if we try. We have never been separate from the earth. We are nature, we are the universe, we are the world. To use that song, we are the world. And it's in this awareness that we walk. It is in this awareness that we work. It is in this awareness that we heal. But we must walk. We must do it. We must have, Joel has a beautiful tape. I think it's one of the 1964 tapes, either 63 or 64, where he talks about the unveiling of I. And he says, one of the problems that you have is that you do not have the courage of knowing that I and the Father are one. And it's true. But that courage, the very act of courage, is God in motion. I mean, it's not that we really don't have the courage. If we had the courage, it's because God is the courage moving through us. In that very second of realization, in that very second of transformation. But it is that very second that transforms what we are and what our friends are. And whatever we're going to be afterwards. The kingdom of God is within you. The very awareness of what we are is a transformation. The very awareness of what we are is the light. We are light. Shining forth in this path. Right identification is the only word and the only thing we should be worrying about until it really happens. And I can assure you that it's already happening in many of us. But right identification should be the exercise that we should hold on for months and months and months until it happens. When you least expect it, the bridegroom cometh. And I can assure you of that, because I never expected it last December. That was the last thing I ever expected. All I knew was a deep desire for a retreat. That's the only thing that was in my head. And the very second, when you least expect it, you're clipped. There was another phrase from the Bible, from Kings, that caught my eye this afternoon. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, still small voice. When we want to, this is one of the phrases that we usually expect. We always expect a voice. And many times, we always expect an experience. And that's the very thing that precludes the experience. I was talking to someone yesterday who was saying, when I meditate, I have a feeling of peace, but I don't have experiences. Isn't the feeling of peace a powerful experience? What else do you want? I mean, fireworks? The mind will give it to you. Anything we want, it will give it to us. Peace is a tremendous experience. That feeling of peace is such a powerful experience that changes everything. Some people will have whatever experience. We are all conditioned by films. You have the sun breaking through the clouds. Today you have on television with the talking Bible, and you have that big, deep voice. You see? And this is the way we are conditioned. And then we go into meditation and we expect that. We expect the sun breaking through the cloud and the big voice coming over and just giving us whatever. That precludes the experience. God will manifest in each of us in a different way. Some will have a voice sometimes, and some will have a feeling of peace. And some will have other things which nobody knows of. The experience of meditation should never be preconditioned by anything. And we must become aware that the media gives us the signs. Hollywood gives us the signs. You have God breaking through the clouds, and we expect that experience. Or the talking Bible. The very deep voice just telling us that, here I am. It's not that way. God speaks in so many ways. When I first started meditating in New York City, I remember one day I was going to work and I had the deep feeling of not going to work today and just go out and walk. So I got off the subway station and walked. As I was walking, there was a man looked at me and he called me. I went over to see him and I thought he was crazy, or he seemed so. And one of the persons who told me, he told me so many truths in 5 seconds. And I was very much taken aback for a while. And then I realized God is speaking through this man. And apparently I did not have the equipment to have a real experience. But sometimes if you don't have the equipment ready, God will have it for you through somebody else. And the man just laid down in front of me and he just told me everything. And I was not fully shocked. I mean, I was meditating and I realized, well, God must have something to tell me through this man. But the depth of what the man gave me that moment. A few days after, or a few weeks after, I used to be a counselor in it was not a drug rehabilitation program. We used to take all the drops out of society, all kinds of dropouts, between 16 and 21. And this client came in one day, and as I was interviewing him, he stopped me cold and he said, Rafael, I didn't come here for you to interview me. I came here to tell you. And he proceeded to just go on and just tell me everything that was going to happen in my life for the next 5 or 10 years. And he finished and he left. I was shocked. I closed my office and I went into meditation and I said to myself, what is this? Anyhow, everything he said did come to life. And what happened, in a way, was very much what's said in the Bible over and over and over. An angel comes in and just prepares you for what's going to happen. A few years later, then I discovered the infinite way. And I remember reading, Practicing the Presence. And I realized that's the next step. And 2 months later, I found my first infinite way teacher in the very town that I had just moved in. You see, it, for some reason, we are all walking the same path. Actually, not for some reason. For the glory of God. Each one of us are part of the remnant who are bringing this into a full realization at this time. Each one of us has a very definite and specific place this time. This center here is not here by chance. We are not traveling to meet each other by chance. We are bringing about a new age. And we are doing it every single moment we meditate, every single minute we live, every moment of life, right here on the three-dimensional world, the fourth dimension is realized. Every single second. And out of it is the experience. Last week, when I was in bed with a cold and wondering, what is the purpose of all this? What am I doing here? And here I had this experience. I'm going to have a class, the first class next week, and here I am. But it didn't bother me in the sense that I didn't know what to do. It just dawned. I said, what is the meaning of it? And all of a sudden, I became aware of healing. I was centering my whole attention on healing a physical body, when healing is immense. The whole field of healing, it was something I just didn't know. I was not aware of. All I had was that dot on that big wall, and I was centering my attention on it. When I became aware of the whole wall, the dot disappeared. Then I was worried about teaching a class. You're getting ready for different things. And the pains and the fever and everything else went away. Healing is much more than physical healing. It's the same thing as supply. We think of supply as money, but we never think of supply as ideas, as fulfillment, as all the things we do every day. If we just take for 1 second and make an inventory of whatever we do throughout the day, and look at the ideas that come through. Ideas are fulfillment. Ideas are supply. And God fulfills itself as you. God fulfills itself as ideas. God fulfills itself as happiness, as everything we do. We are the fulfillment of God. That's what we are. God fulfilling itself as you and as me. Every day, every moment. And now you can look at your children and send them out, and don't be afraid, because God is fulfilling itself as your son and your daughters and nephews and nieces. And just let them blossom. Why be afraid? Why be afraid? Once you do that in the full realization of who they are, which is who you are, they can go on. What can happen to them? Or what can happen to you? God fulfills itself as us. Not tomorrow, now. Right now. We are God fulfilling itself as the joy, as the health, as the fragrance of the flowers. When we finish today and we go outside, please look out to the sky and become aware that that is your very consciousness.